there are plenty of people on all sides that don't like Alex Jones. So it makes a lot of sense to take him down first. First of all, they all want to mount his head on their wall. And secondly, they know that if they took him down, people on all sides would cheer. And once you could get people to cheer for taking someone down, it's game over. You can just now do it to everyone. I think the whole thing is just simply spiritual. It's the polarization isn't political. The polarization are people that are looking for the truth, people that are waking up and looking for the truth, and people that are looking to silence the truth. That's where we're at.
This important update is brought to you in part by our friends at Rugged Reserves. Their Patriot flashlight is a must-have. Just think about it. When you pack your bug-out bag, you want everything from a glass-breaking hammer to a cell phone charger to a flashlight to a wire cutter and a compass. Well, you can get all of that and more with the Patriot flashlight. Light up the darkness with 500 lumens that can be seen miles away. And there's an emergency strobe with 4 unique lighting modes. And now the Patriot flashlight even has an emergency siren. And you know what the best part is? It's solar powered. So this bad boy will always have power when you need it most. It really does make the perfect gift. Get one for your bug out bag, for your car, for your home. Just visit patriotflashlight.com. I'll leave the link below this video. And while supplies last, use promo code SGT25 to save 25% off your purchase. That's patriotflashlight.com. The link is below this video. Hey friends, thank you so very much for tuning in. It's absolutely wonderful to have you back. I really appreciate it. I think you're going to enjoy this video because every now and then a new content producer comes on the scene and everybody stops and goes, whoa, where'd that guy come from? I have Greg Reese on the line. You might know him from Infowars. He got himself hired there and he's doing an absolute bang-up job. Greg, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. I reached out to you because we sort of have a common friend in Corey Lynn over at CoreyDiggs.com. And ironically, Corey had asked me, please take all my Clinton research about human trafficking and make a video about it. And I looked at her articles. I read her articles. They're so lengthy, so detailed. I didn't know where to begin. And then, guys, guess what happened? Greg Reese produced this.
Investigative journalist Corey Lynn recently asked the question, are Bill and Hillary Clinton involved with child trafficking? While we are still free to ask questions, let's take a close look at what we know about the Clintons and their associates.
Guys, I'll pause it there. The title of that video is, Are the Clintons Involved in Human Trafficking? I'll put the link to that video below this video so you can watch the full 8 minutes for yourself. It was produced by Greg Reese. His YouTube channel is Greg Reese, R-E-E-S-E. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Greg. Where did you come from and where did you get these video making skills? Where'd you get the knack to tell stories the way you do?
It's arguably my oldest passion. The first project I made was, I was 8 years old and I definitely had some assistance with my mother and father. And I used a Super 8 camera in my sandbox and the video was about the extinction of the dinosaurs. So I made like a paper mache asteroid and had some gasoline and rubber dinosaurs and stuff like that. And from there, I remember in high school when video came out, I would have like 2 VHS decks hacked together, which made for terrible, horrible, sloppy edits. But that's all I had at the time. And then in 1999, I got my first computer for digital, and that really changed my world. Before computer technology, I thought I would never be able to afford to, you kind of had to be rich or have rich parents to be a filmmaker. And so it's been kind of forever. Music and I was making music since I was 9. So using the two together has always been the funnest thing to do in my life.
Yeah, well, you're really good with the music and music mix. I want to ask you actually about that. Maybe you can give some of us creators some tips on where you find your music and how you mix it. But let me just say this. My buddy David Weiss has famously said in an interview I did with him and Marty Leeds regarding the lies of the elite, our optics have outgrown their lies. He's referring to our consumer available optics. We can now zoom closer into the moon. We can do infrared photography. We can do so many things that weren't able to be done just 20 years ago. And I think the same is true with filmmaking. The filmmaking business, right? The truth-telling business on YouTube has become democratized because our technology is just as good as the technology they use in Hollywood. You want Photoshop, you want Illustrator, you want After Effects, you want any of the tools they use in big Hollywood or commercial productions, you can get that stuff and it's not that expensive, including great camera gear. and great. Well, I do all my stuff on a MacBook Pro in Final Cut. And it just needs to be said that anybody that wants to get into the business of competing with CNN's lies, you can do it. And Greg Reese is a great example of that. Greg, my hat's off to you, man. You do good work.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about your experience. You got hired at Infowars. There's a cottage industry now of bashing Alex Jones all day long, even though he's been absolutely depersoned and deplatformed on every social media avenue there is, and now they're coming for the rest of us. So what's it like working at Infowars, and how'd you get hired there?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, and I'd love to answer it. And I agree. I've been a fan of Infowars since 2004, when I had what I would call sort of my spiritual awakening, which was mostly around the moon and NASA and the Bohemian Grove, as Alex Jones exposed I think back in 2001 or something, but I saw it in 2004. And so ever since then, I've been a big fan of Alex Jones. That was back when he was more serious. And then later on, he sort of developed his personality, and I loved him then. I have a sense of humor. And then, so what happened was basically, I was in a yoga ashram for about 3 years, where I lived in a temple all by myself, outside of the 8 hours a day I would work like a mile away in this community. And that put me in an opportunity to really sort of go within and deal with some personal stuff. And I was kind of separated from the real world. This is during the Trump election. Unfortunately, I didn't vote because I never voted, because I've believed that the system has been rigged my whole life. My whole life, I've been a bit of I don't trust the government kind of person. So I'm looking forward to voting in the future. But anyways, so I thought the system was too rigged to win. When Trump got elected, it was like the twilight zone for me. And then that changed everything. I knew I needed to leave the ashram, and I needed to get involved. Well, to be honest, when I saw that the Marines were bombing the poppy fields, that's when a light went off in my head and said, okay, there's a real fight going on. Because at first I was suspicious. I was like, how did Trump get elected? He must be part of this game. But once I saw the bombing of the poppy fields, that did it for me. And then I had, luckily that same year, while I was going through this mental process and praying, saying, God, please somehow get me involved, I managed to buy Bitcoin at 1,200. And then by the end of the year, when I had my plane ticket already bought to go to Hawaii, which I really couldn't afford when I bought it, I just knew I needed to go somewhere and get involved in the fight, I picked Hawaii. So then by then I had Bitcoin was about 18, 19 grand, and I sold a Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin got me to Hawaii. As soon as I moved to Hawaii, the volcano that lived 3 miles away from me erupted. And then Infowars announced a hiring spree and a contest. And as soon as I saw that Infowars was hiring, I took that as an offer. I took that as the universe or God saying, here's your opportunity. And so I jumped on that opportunity, and I got as soon as I got Rob Dew's contact info, then I made plans and I moved to Austin. And once I moved to Austin, I called him up and I said, I'm here. So you really ought to hire me. I kind of made it as awkward as possible. And I got hired, and the experience has been great. And I know that's a long story, but I'll continue with showing up in Infowars, because it was actually I was a fan for a long time. You talk about the cottage industry of bashing Jones. I've always just figured that was ego. Alex has been doing this arguably longer than anyone. There was Bill Cooper sort of overlapping. Then the other thing is I always sort of dismissed it as the Jew haters. I figured it's the Jew haters that hate Alex because he supports Israel, and the term Jew haters is a bit insulting, but it's insulting on purpose. And the Jew haters seem to think that Israel's the problem and we have to get rid of Israel, and Israel. So, right. But then the other hand is, I think anyone who makes money is suddenly a shill, which is kind of ridiculous, because to me, that's a big part of freedom, and having a free country is free enterprise and free market, and money is a thing, an important thing of survival. So
Well, you know, it's a topic that we could have avoided if we don't want dislikes on this video, because again, bashing Alex Jones has become such a popular thing to do that just because you work there and now we're talking about Alex Jones, I'll probably get a lot of negative comments and thumbs down. And I think people need to be more intellectually honest. Now, you mentioned the Jew issue. We have President Trump appointing an anti-Semitism czar recently. That's concerning. They want to ban the topic of criticizing Zionism. They're trying to equate Zionism with Judaism. Specifically, being a Zionist with being a Jew, exactly the same thing. That's the new narrative. And that's scarier than hell, because Zionism and Judaism are two different things. And I think one of the charges Alex gets accused of frequently is covering up for Zionists or being a Zionist. And we don't have to go down that rabbit hole unless you want to, but that's the point I want to make, is that they are two distinctly different things. Not all Jews are Zionists. I mean, we famously have Joe Biden saying, "I'm not a Jew, but I'm a Zionist."
Yeah, well, a lot of people say that.
I'll play the clip right here. Here's Joe Biden saying, "I'm a proud Zionist."
You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
So your thoughts on any of that, or do you want to move on? Because here's the thing, man. Since Donald J. Trump took office, we've been hearing that there was real Russian collusion to get him hired, and everything else that runs counter to that narrative is a conspiracy theory, right? That's what we're told by the mainstream media. Meanwhile, there's such things as, you mentioned, the Bohemian Grove, the Bilderberg Group, which is about set to meet, which Alex Jones has done a good job covering, Skull and Bones at Yale, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission. These are all groups that meet in secret, and what they discuss is private. Are you telling me that that's not a conspiracy? They obviously conspire. So I just wanted to share that as it relates to Alex Jones, Zionism. I'm willing to talk about all of it.
Well, first I'll say that when I first showed up, like I said, my whole life, I pretty much suspect and don't really trust anyone. So I didn't know what to expect. I was excited. I was all in, but I didn't know what to expect. But what I found was, as soon as I got there, basically they said, look, you know how to make videos. Here are the upload, passwords. Go ahead and just pick a story and try to tell the truth. And that was it, which blew my mind, because I was thinking it's a pretty big operation. I was thinking they're going to have some kind of plan, agenda, outline. And no, it's basically just do your thing and try to tell the truth. And so it's been like a dream job, because I just show up and I pick the stories that I'm excited about, and I do and it's great. I can't speak for Alex on the Zionism thing, but I can speak for myself. If anyone looks at any of my older videos from 2004 all the way up until Trump, there are, whether they're satirical music, humor videos or serious videos, you'll see the Star of David and Zionist symbolism peppered through them very critically. Anti-Israel all the way. I think I was probably in the camp of saying Israel did 9/11. What changed it for me was, throughout all of this, I was completely ignorant to Islam. Recently, it was actually around the time of Trump's election when I really started researching Islam. And before I looked at Islam, I hardly knew anything. I didn't know about the caliphates. I didn't know about the 400 years of caliphates that were before the Crusades. I didn't know about the Quran. I didn't know about the Hadith. I didn't know about any of this stuff. And the more I learn about Islam, the more uncomfortable I feel. The way I look at it is, the world is an imperfect place. What we have with Trump is better than anything I ever imagined, hopefully, unless this is some type of play. But I don't think it is, and I'm all aboard and trying to do my best to help. And I think you got to pick your battles. And so currently, I am open to the ideas of standing against Islam.
Well, yeah, and Islam has revealed itself to be, especially the hardcore radical Islamicists, have revealed themselves to be terrifyingly horrific people who are willing to cut the heads off of Christians. And so you're right about that. You mentioned 9/11. I just have to go back, though, and say, I wouldn't pin the whole thing on the back of Israel, but definitely the Mossad, in my opinion, was involved. And I would call attention to Christopher Bolin's work and interviews I've done with Christopher Bolin, which, of course, were banned on YouTube. And my buddy Adam Green over there at No More News has interviewed Christopher Bolin in detail about his book about 9/11. And many of the roads do go back to, I think the Mossad might be a better way to state it than just Israel, because it's the deep state. Just
No, you
like
know
in
what?
this
Yeah, you're
country,
right.
we have the CIA, we have intelligence agencies that I think were involved in what happened on that day, working together to pull off something that changed the world. And the one thing I'd want to say about 9/11 is if 9/11 didn't happen, I don't know that I would have woken up to the degree I did as quickly as I did.
Me neither.
9/11 to me was a trigger event. The spell they've cast on humanity that they've been able to pull off time and time again and perpetrate crimes against humanity that they've been doing for decade after decade, for centuries, that spell didn't work on 9/11. It worked maybe for a second, but man, it woke up a ton of people.
Everything you just said, 100%, in my opinion, to wrap up the Israel question. Yeah, you know what? When you say Mossad and CIA, that's what it is. It's the intelligence agencies all over the globe seem to be the sort of tactical arm of the secret societies of globalism. You know, working this all together.
Right.
And 9/11, 100% same experience. It was at first it triggered me. In 2003, I actually tried to join the military again, and that's a whole other story. And then in 2004 is when I had this awakening, and I saw basically everything I'm still seeing now. So, but yeah, the intelligence agencies, 100%, and that's the thing that I get down on the whole Israel thing is Israel is a country full of people. The world is full of people. I've been in touch with a lot of people in Iran lately. Iran are people just like us. All over the world, there are people just like you and me and everyone else. And we all are, I think, reaching a point of awakening where we're realizing how unfree we've been, and we're realizing the potential that we could be maybe a little bit more free. For some people, it could be a lot more free.
Yeah.
And what I hope is to see the whole world. I mean, it's almost like a globalism is happening. A real globalism is happening on a nationalist level. And then there's this fake globalism that's being sold to the New Agers or whatever. And we all want the same thing.
It's a great awakening, right?
Yes.
So we talked about this paradigm shift that everybody thought might happen in 2012 based on the Mayan calendar or whatever. If you look back now at 2012 to now, there has been a great awakening. The spells
100%.
are being broken, and that's the exciting part. I would agree with you that there is, look, at Brexit, look, Theresa May was just forced to resign. Macron got defeated. This movement of freedom and liberty is catching fire all across the globe. Well, at least in Europe and in this country. So that's the good news. But the enemies of our freedom and our liberties, exemplified by the Democrats at this point, I can't think of a more treacherous group of people who cling to lies. Let me quote this. Bertolt Brecht, a German playwright and poet, I've quoted this once before. He said, "He who does not know the truth is just a fool, but he who knows it and calls it a lie is a criminal." That exemplifies these Democrats and this deep state, the head of which, at least as it pertains to Russiagate, is Robert Mueller. These people are liars, and they know they're liars. They have no shame, man. But I think people are waking up. It's just like the people in Europe, in the UK, that wanted Brexit. They weren't going to stomach Theresa May's BS anymore. Now they're standing with Nigel Farage. This is a great awakening, Greg.
I agree. When I kind of woke up in 2004, I assumed this was going to happen immediately. And I guess one of the things I've learned through the whole process is how impatient my mind is, because I kind of gave up hope about halfway through Obama. I said, it's never going to happen. And people are just falling more asleep. And that's when I started focusing on, a spiritual sort of inward journey, which was great as well. But then Trump reminded me, no, the Great Awakening is happening. It's happening. And Trump is just part of it. Like you're talking about the Democrats. Yes. But here's my take on that. And maybe I am an optimist, so I could just be optimistic. But my feeling is if the higher ups on the pyramid haven't been taken down already, then Trump already would have been killed. Maybe I give him too much credit. I don't know. And then when you take into account what I saw the Marines bombing the poppy fields, and I think the loud booms heard underground in 2017 or whatever. I tend to think that what we're left with are the celebrities, the people in the media, the people in Hollywood. They can't go anywhere. They can't really run away. They're sort of stuck. Maybe I'm being too hopeful, but that's what it seems like to me. And that alone is difficult enough to deal with.
You know what? You mentioned something interesting. Those underground booms in 2017, there was some talk that maybe some underground bases were being destroyed. This whole idea that white hats were fighting back against this satanic deep state, I think exemplified best by George H.W. Bush Sr., whose father was Prescott Bush, who famously was involved with industrialists and bankers in the 1930s in a coup to overthrow the U.S. government. That's on the record, folks. There were congressional hearings, and of course, none of the henchmen, none of the elite went to jail, but this is all on the record, and General Smedley Butler spent the rest of his life trying to tell that story because he's the one that blew the whistle on the plan. Maybe you're right, because the head of the snake, as it pertains to the deep state in this country, was George H.W. Bush. And you'll remember that funeral. Remember the reaction of Jeb Bush and George Bush Jr., and George Bush's wife, and all of those people were looking at something they were handed, envelopes, and they all had shocked faces. So maybe something really fundamental and huge did change. But I think once H.W. Bush died, nobody was willing to step into that vacuum because that was a vacuum of pure evil, and none of the Bush sons were up to the task.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Yeah. When the booms were happening, once again, I'll say, I want this to happen. So I understand my mind will filter and make me, see things in that light. But when the booms were happening, I was looking into them all the time, and they were everywhere. All I could think was they're blowing up their bunkers, so they got nowhere else to run, which would make sense for tactical reasons, and it would explain the madness that was happening around that time. People were. There was the one thing that always convinces me that Trump is not part of the game is they're not good enough actors. And I do have a conspiracy theory that could explain it, but it's far out there. And even if it's true, it doesn't change anything. So, but they hate him. You've never seen this before. You've never seen the entire pop culture establishment rise against someone. That's right. Like the Twilight Zone.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. Because you'll recall that if it was Bush in the White House or Obama in the White House, had it been Clinton in the White House, the media apparatus and the entire Democratic Party would not be aligned against an establishment candidate. For instance, Al Gore, had he ever been president, or John McCain. If John McCain had become president, the entire media apparatus would not be aligned against John McCain like they are against
No, they
Donald
would defend
Trump.
him. Even the liberal media would defend him at every turn. Yeah.
And that's because they are part of the deep state. They are literally the CIA mockingbird whore media. I mean, that's what I call them now because that's what they are. They've sold their souls to the deep state, to the devil.
And that's the saddest thing is so if that's all that's left, it's fitting because it is the saddest part of the story is seeing our brethren, our sisters and brothers brainwashed. I mean, the sad thing is we've all been there. Like when I keep mentioning 2004, that's basically the moment where I kind of snapped out of the brainwashing and stuff. But we've all been there for the most part. And I pray and implore everyone to wake up and join us because it's really getting sad to watch. It's really getting really sad to watch. And the more you think about it, the more obvious it is that television and pop culture is brainwashing. But you try to say that to someone who's in it, and I think it's simply that you live in enough of a comfortable life, you can kind of get away with pretending that evil doesn't exist.
Right.
And then you hear these stories and your mind just says, no, that's not possible. Humans aren't capable of that.
Yeah, these people are capable of some of the most unimaginable evil, and that's been part of the Great Awakening, this child sex trafficking, the human trafficking. You did the video about it. Corey Lynn did all that wonderful research. You guys go check out corysdigs.com. It's all there, the connections the Clintons have to all of these horrible pedophiles and child sex traffickers and organizations set up apparently to protect that business and to traffic in children. Can I just, you can react to that in a second. Let me say one thing. We were talking about the booms. I want to clarify something. We hear about all those mysterious booms and the UFO channels report about it. And Linda Moulton Howe reports about the booms, the mysterious booms people were hearing. That's one thing. I was actually referring to a seismic event that happened on the East Coast, I think around Virginia. That's the specific event I was talking about.
Oh, a single incident.
Yeah, about taking down, the speculation being that an underground base may have been destroyed. Some people reported that is exactly what happened. So, but then we have the mysterious booms all over the country too. So that's a whole nother question mark.
You're talking about the one by Arlington.
I think that was the one, and it was a
Yes,
seismic
I remember
event,
that. Yeah,
and
yeah.
some people said it looked to be a tactical nuke exploded underground, not an earthquake. All right, so the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, these people are absolutely diabolical, and they tell us that we're conspiracy theorists to report about the John Podesta emails that clearly use coded language acknowledged by the FBI, coded language that pedophiles use when communicating to each other. And we're conspiracy theorists to talk about people like James Alefantis, who was named the 50th most powerful person in Washington, D.C. by GQ magazine, and he's just a quote-unquote pizza shop owner. You tell me who the conspiracy theorists are. To me, it sounds like people like Jake Tapper, whose wife Jennifer Tapper told the Washingtonian before anyone had ever heard the term Pizzagate, she told the Washingtonian that their favorite family restaurant was Comet Ping Pong, and their favorite date night restaurant was Buck's Fishing and Camping, both on that same street, both related to James Alefantis. What are the chances that Jennifer Tapper and Jake Tapper's favorite restaurants are those among all the wonderful thousands of high-level, wonderful restaurants in Washington, D.C.? But we're the conspiracy theorists, Greg.
Well, first of all, I would say that Pizzagate is what broke everything. I've been sort of following whatever you want to call this truth. I've been in the truther movement, I guess, since 2004, and nothing was like Pizzagate. Pizzagate broke it all open, and ever since then, everyone's been freaking out, and it's been red alert everywhere.
And do you agree maybe we should call it Pedogate now? Because Pizzagate relates to the DC-centric ring of human or child sex trafficking as indicated by the Podesta emails. But the global problem, the global plague of the exact same thing is Pedogate.
Yeah. It's the most unacceptable thing in humanity, because the thing about child abuse, and I have experience with this myself, is what it does is it disrupts a human's life. Now that human might be able to get their course back, or they may not, but it's like probably the biggest crime you could argue is to disrupt an innocent life and to, add a bunch of garbage into it. And I would say that the people that don't see it, I said earlier, there are people that are good people that are incapable of seeing that evil exists. That's some people. But there's also a huge category of victims and perpetrators that will claim to not see it. And some maybe subconsciously see it and consciously don't. But I know from experience as a victim that not of sexual abuse, but of more of a traumatic abuse when I was 5, that for 36 years I wasn't consciously aware of it, and I would be denying, in my mind at least, I would think that these stories are not true. And I realize now that's based on my own mind trying to protect myself from my own secrets. And so I think, and the other thing is I'm fairly open about this, and I talk to I'm talkative. And what I found is about half the people I talk to about that say, yeah, me too. I've had an experience like that when I was a child too. So if that's a true estimation that half the population has had experience with this, then it would make sense why so many people are blinded by it. And when you look at all the psychology behind it, and you understand that the Nazis studied it, and it's probably been studied before them, it's probably been studied thousands of years ago. Some people say in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it talks about this stuff, that they understand exactly how it works. And it's done specifically to control people, to have power over people, to use it as a currency. The good news is that if you put stock in other ancient traditions, in the yoga tradition, the Hindu tradition, they say that there's cycles, which a lot of traditions agree with, and it makes sense. And that they say we are in the Kali Yuga, and next after the Kali Yuga is a golden age of truth and enlightenment. And what marks the peak of the Kali Yuga, many scholars say, is when humans begin breeding children for the purpose of consumption. Is that then you'll know that the Kali Yuga is basically over and we're into the golden age. And that's exactly where we're at. I heard that maybe 3 years ago, and I said, oh, thank God we're not there yet. But we were there 3 years ago. I just didn't see it. And we're definitely there now with the late-term abortions and people cheering for abortions and cannibalism. And I mean, we're there. So it's from here on out, I think we're on the way to the golden age, although it'll likely take generations maybe. So.
All right. I'd never heard that. That's horrifying. So it calls to mind some of the horrors we believe may have been taking place on Epstein's Island, Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted pedophile's island. Say that again. So when humans are breeding children for the purposes of consumption, meaning cannibalism?
Yes. Yeah. Or
that's horrifying.
They didn't describe it any more than that. They just said breeding children for the term of consuming them, for the purpose of consuming them. And I would say
could be Moloch level sacrifice.
It could be multiple things. It could be just the idea of having a child considered as a piece of property alone, I would say falls into that category of consumption, because it's not, that's the whole argument with abortion is some people don't recognize, or they don't think that a life is a soul that has its own connection to God, that has its own purpose to God. Some people don't see that. Some people just see it as a thing that doesn't matter. And that's where we've gotten. And that's the huge crime.
Well, I think that's why there's been such a pushback in certain states against this pro-abortion agenda, because these people on the left have absolutely lost their minds. And that's not hyperbolic. They've lost their minds. They've certainly lost their way as it relates to being human beings that appreciate and value life in this world. Because when Governor Cuomo signed that bill into law in New York State, allowing for ninth-month abortions, the legislators cheered and applauded. And that is absolute madness, because if they're being intellectually honest, they have to recognize that a baby in the ninth month is viable outside the vagina. And when it hasn't breached the vagina, they're claiming it's still not a person. That's just absolute lunacy. And that's where we've gotten. It's shocking to any of us who are Christians and who are right-thinking people and who actually, quote unquote, fear God, right? I would fear God's wrath if I was one of these lunatic liberals, which I guess is why they militantly don't believe in God, because then anything goes and they don't have to worry about their actions. But I don't know who'd want to live life that way. To me, that's hell on earth, having those beliefs and carrying them out and cheering for ninth-month abortion. It's hell on earth.
Well, here's something. I always wondered the same thing. How is it possible? Because I grew up, I was raised Catholic. I think at 5 years old, something happened that shifted me from where I didn't like Catholicism, but I maintained a relationship with Christ my whole life. I never talked about it because it was something, one, it was personal to me. And two, to be honest, I guess maybe I was embarrassed. I never really talked about my relationship to Christ until recently, until 2 years ago, when all of a sudden I started seeing how Christians were under attack. And then so out of more of a sense of solidarity is when I started speaking up. But I saw a video on YouTube, and I was always wondering how are people capable of being like this? For a while, I thought maybe some people don't have souls. Maybe people are just evil. I don't know. But I saw a video on YouTube of a gang member in Los Angeles who the story was he used to be in a satanic cult gang, and then he left that, and he's no longer in it. But the video is him talking about it.
I've seen it.
Yes, interesting. And what he says in the video basically is, once you do a horrible enough thing, you no longer believe that God will have you, and then you just sort of keep repeating it because there's nowhere else to go, and you feel like that's your only choice. And I can understand that, because I understand insecurity, I understand self-doubt, I understand self-loathing, I understand these things, and I can see if you get to a dark place, you can just get stuck in that downward spiral.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we'd pray for those people and tell them, just fall on your knees and beg for forgiveness and cry out to the Lord Jesus Christ for forgiveness, because none of us is perfect. All of us are flawed, and anyone can be forgiven and redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ. It needs to be said, because we are opposed by a very dark force, and so many of these people on the left have fallen prey to it, and so we need to pray for them. Let me ask you this before I forget. We're going to talk about mass censorship, but I said early on in the video, you do remarkable work with your videos in music. Where do you pick your music, and how do you mix it? Because I communicated to you in an email when I invited you on. I'm like, your music mixes are so good. Mine, I use these earbuds when I'm mixing my stuff. It sounds great if you wear headphones, but then I found a lot of times if you're not wearing headphones, my music mix is way too low. Sometimes you can't hear the music. Sometimes it's too loud. Where do you find your music? And well, let's start there. Where do you find your music to begin with? You've got great stuff.
Well, that's my favorite part of the project. My favorite. So what I do first is I write the script. As soon as I write the script, or sometimes I make the music first, but then I produce my own music. And I've been making music as long as I've been doing videos. So, and I consider it part of the process. So once I write the script, then I compose the audio score, and that consists of the entire video in completion audio wise. So I'll use Reason, Propellerhead's Reason is my program that I use. I use that to produce the music. And then on top of that, I'll lay my voiceover and any video clips, any audio from any video clips I'm going to be using. I do that all at once. And then the beauty of that is I'm focused completely with my ears. So my eyes aren't, I'm just using only my ears, getting it just how I want, in a time frame where I can get it done. And then once I put that in my video software, I also add with it a click track. So I see visual clicks, usually just quarter note clicks throughout the entire video. And then I can use those clicks to line my video cuts up to. So I won't always line them up to a quarter note. Sometimes I'll syncopate it a little bit, but basically the video is always cut to the music as if it's an instrument. And then from there, if I have time and I need to tweak it, I can always just go back to tweak it in the audio program, and it's all lined up and ready to go in the video program. But I would say making the music is probably my favorite part. When I was in high school, I used to daydream about making music for films. I used to be a huge movie junkie, and that used to be kind of my dream job. And so I love it.
So this is original music. You're making a lot of this music?
I make all of it. I think every video I've used is music. I've sampled a couple things. I think I sampled for a recent video on Islam. I sampled a bit from the zombie horror movie from the video game. I can't remember the name of the.
Well, look, we buried the lead, man. You're a musician. I didn't know that. I mean, ultimately, you're a musician if you're making this kind of these kind of tracks for your videos. I didn't know that. I was sort of driving at this idea that, look, finding great needle drop is really difficult. And you're not using needle drop. I mean, if people don't know what needle drop is, those are traditionally licensed tracks. You pay for a service. You can go through a whole library of music, and then you have the copyright, at least you have the permission to use that music in your videos. You don't even use needle drop. So there's the punchline to that story, guys. This guy makes his own music. All right, brother, let me ask you this before we part ways. Let's talk about mass censorship. Alex Jones has been deplatformed, depersoned, and now they're coming after everybody else. And when I say everybody else, guys, I mean everybody else. I'm going to do a video about this. Search this out on YouTube. It's from a YouTube channel called Coffee Break. What 40,000 videos tells us about the trending tab. I had no idea, Greg, that this problem on YouTube is affecting all creators. I mean, the biggest people out there, Philip DeFranco, PewDiePie, everybody's being affected by this new algorithm change implemented by YouTube on January 22nd. They said to filter out what they deem misinformation, but it's worse than that. If you take a look at this trending tab data, pretty much more than 90% now of the trending videos on YouTube are big mainstream channels. In the news space, it's CNN, it's Fox, it's MSNBC. In the other spaces, it's other mainstream stuff, Hollywood stuff. It's no longer the bread and butter YouTube creators that built YouTube and made it what it is. YouTube is literally destroying itself. Google knows it because Google lost $70 billion in market cap when they reported earnings recently saying, hey, this is due to our algorithms change and we're no longer monetizing a lot of these videos. They're hurting themselves to shut us up. And Alex Jones is the poster boy for all of it.
Yes. And, I've almost worked there a year, and I started a week after they censored Jones, and it's been, every day I wake up honored. Every day I wake up, I think we're going to win. I think we're already winning. And, I think on my deathbed, I'll be talking about, how I worked for Alex Jones. And I think he's honored. He's definitely honored. He wasn't expecting to be the poster child for it. It's frustrating for him as well, but it makes sense because, like we said in the beginning of the conversation, there are plenty of people on all sides that don't like Alex Jones. And so he was the biggest one. I think his company doubled in 2016 at the election. I think arguably the Alex Jones audience was a big part of getting Trump elected. I mean, this is an audience that doesn't vote, and they were all fired up to vote for Trump. So it makes a lot of sense to take him down first. First of all, they all want to hang him on there. They all want to mount his head on their wall. And secondly, they know that if they took him down, people on all sides would cheer. And once you could get people to cheer for taking someone down, it's game over. You can just now do it to everyone.
Yeah, I think it's the litmus test is not the right language, but I think Alex Jones is that
the beta test, maybe.
The beta test, the test case for this. If it's allowed to stand, if he can just be deplatformed from Twitter, from Facebook, from YouTube, then anybody can. Right? And this is what's so un-American about it. So they're doing the same thing to me to the extent that, okay, I'm still on YouTube, but they've changed their algorithms. They're not recommending as many of my videos as they did in 2018. The numbers have dropped by 40% in terms of my recommended videos. And now Google has changed their algorithms to prevent SGT report articles that we post, dozens per day from truth media sources that we respect. Those news results aren't coming up in the Google feed. So the only way people are finding sgtreport.com now is by going directly to, type it into your Brave browser, sgtreport.com. It's the only way you're going to find us. And they're doing the same thing to Alex Jones. The only way people can find him now is by going directly to Infowars.com. It's just so damn un-American, and they ought not get away with it. You know what, Alex, please ask him on my behalf to start a class action lawsuit, open a GoFundMe. I will help raise money for it. We need to have a class action lawsuit against YouTube and Twitter and Facebook immediately, and Google too.
I agree. And the best argument I heard, I can't remember who made it, but someone made the argument that the law is already in place. The law that the argument of
Section 230, I think, under the Communications Decency Act, prohibits these social media giants from doing what they're doing, because once they start to pick and choose content, they're curators instead of publishers, right? So then they're legally liable. So all we're asking for is the fair and level playing field that YouTube used to be, that Facebook presumably was at one point. I don't know about that. But Twitter too. They cannot deperson people based on political views and political speech. They like to preach all day about Nazis. They're behaving like Nazis, like Stalin-esque fascists. That's what they're doing, and they're getting away with it.
Yep. Well, I remember, I think I was 25, 26 at the time when I was confronted with a crazy person who was yelling and screaming at me, pointing their finger at me, and they were describing me as themselves. And that was the first time that happened to me. And I was like, and it felt crazy. I was like, this person, they call that projecting now, but I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, this person is projecting themselves completely onto me. And it was mad. And that's not only what we're seeing, but it seems to be a tactical strategy that they use. And I guess it creates cognitive dissonance and confuses people. But I think the whole thing is just simply spiritual. It's the polarization isn't political. The polarization are people that are looking for the truth, people that are waking up and looking for the truth, and people that are looking to silence the truth. And that's where we're at. Yeah. Whether they're mentally ill or they're criminal.
Well, I think that's true. And it takes me back to that quote from Bertolt Brecht. He who does not know the truth is just a fool, but he who knows it and calls it a lie is a criminal. And these people, the Democrats and the mainstream media, Google, and these social media platforms have been weaponized against truth. That's what's going on here. I think you're 100% right. Too much truth is spilling out, too much Brexit, too many people not wanting to listen to Rothschild puppet Macron and instead choosing Le Pen, too many people not wanting Rothschild puppet Clinton or McCain and instead choosing Trump. It's too much truth for them. And so they're changing the rules in the middle of the game to try to put the genie back in the bottle, but I think it's too late, Greg. So final word from you.
Well, a final word for me is just a repetition of what you said earlier, is that I think this is all spiritual, and to fall on your knees and to humble yourself and to turn to God in everything is, I think, that's my only refuge. That's my only answer to myself. And since you were bold enough to say it, I think I'll say it too. I would implore everyone to do that for your own life and for everyone else's, because it really is the only way I think we're going to see our way through this.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I really do appreciate your time. And I'd say this, guys, on Greg's behalf, as it relates to Infowars, Infowars is now much, much bigger than just Alex Jones. Alex Jones has built a platform, and he's bringing people on that platform and allowing them to have their own voices. In a world where basically there's universal deceit, as Orwell said, we have to embrace truth. And I'm glad that Greg Reese found a place over at Infowars. Greg, your YouTube channel is Greg Reese. That's Reese. Is that the best way to find you? And are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I try to stay away from Twitter, although Twitter sucks you in, but YouTube's the way to go. And I am just started a live stream. I streamed a couple nights ago for the first time, and I'm going to be doing it every week and just sort of exploring it, seeing where it goes. When I moved to Hawaii to try to figure out how to get in the fight, the first thing I did, I used to watch your videos, and I was kind of trying to follow in that vein of doing sort of reporting the news regularly and stuff like that. And I just ended up falling into my documentary thing, which is really where that's the beauty in this too, is that so many of us get involved. I encourage everyone to do something to get involved, because what a time to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's so many great people out there, creative people with distinct voices and viewpoints. And you still can find, well, it's getting harder and harder, but you still can find an audience, and you can help in the awakening. That's the bottom line. So shout out to all the good people over at Infowars, and Greg, a shout out to you. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for listening. If this one resonated with you guys, give it a like. That'll help us out, and share it within your sphere of influence on social media. Spread the link. We very much appreciate it. And for real news 24/7, at least as it pertains to me, you guys can visit sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We love you. God bless. Bye-bye.
Space and the moon represent the ultimate high ground. And for some reason, we just walked away from it all. Well, we're not doing space shuttles anymore. We'll just give it to Russia. Anyone wants to go to space on anything has to go to Russia now, our former arch enemies. I've done a lot of work on my channel to try to show that space is misdescribed, and that NASA has basically never told you a true story, at least in my lifetime.